Ladies, gentlemen, and children from around the world, welcome to the Kegel Show. My name is Don Agent, and this week I will be your host. And today I am presented with a very rare opportunity to be able to interview two legends in lane maintenance, Lenny Nicholson and Steve Cross, whom I also call very dear friends as well. Thank you both for coming out for the show.
Man, it's my honor to be here, Donnie.
Glad to be with you, Don, and good to see Lenny once again. I don't see him too often, being in California, so we chat on the phone, but nothing like one-on-one.
This is what, to me, is great about this show, bringing you both together, and I think you bring a lot to the audience, especially with your vast backgrounds. To give a little bit off the top, Lenny, you were the creator and host for the Phantom Radio Show, which goes off every single week. You're an author. You've got the personal memories of the PBA Hall of Famers. You've got something else in the mix we'll chat about a little bit later also, and basically a treasure trove of bowling knowledge. Steve, I mean, you're a career lanesman. You were a competitive bowler back in the day, 20 years as a Kegel lane maintenance technician and globally known. So let's kind of get to the meat of it right out of the gate. And we'll start with you, Lenny. How many years have you been in bowling?
Wow, they built the bowling center right next to where I lived. And in 1956, when I was a sophomore in high school, they opened the bowl. And we went down there. It was free bowling for all the juniors and all the kids. And they put us on a team, and they put me with Billy Hardwick, who I never knew Billy before that. And he was 5'3", 99 pounds. And I think the only reason we were teammates was I was the biggest guy, he was the littlest guy. But we bowled all summer together, and that's how I got involved in bowling.
What year was that?
1956.
Wow, Stevie.
Well, I was 5 years old.
Oh, here's where it's going to come out here. When did you get started in bowling, buddy?
Well, I started once my folks, which my dad worked for the railroad, and he got transferred from St. Paul to Seattle in 1967. And I bowled junior league there for a couple years, and when I moved to Seattle, actually my mom took me down to a center called Robin Hood Lanes. Walked into it and signed up for junior league, and from then on I just got acquisitive with how the business ran, how to do lanes. I even went in the back and pin setters. So February of '68, they actually hired me to be a porter as I was still going to high school in Edmonds, Washington. And it all started in 1967, and then I got paid in '68, and I've been going ever since. So around 52 years.
We've got over 100 years just between both of y'all. I mean, I feel like such a rookie in the middle of this here. What about when did both of you guys meet, Lenny?
I was working on the tour, and in 1988, I went to Las Vegas to do a pre-tournament check. And that's when I met Steve, and he had a partner named Kerry Mogart, and they were in charge of the lane, so I met them at that time.
Now, 1988, just so you both know, that's when I graduated high school. Okay, so that just for the audience there. Can you give us some of the evolutionary process that basically happened with lane maintenance on the PBA Tour over the years between both of y'all?
All right, I'll start with that because I started in '71 on the tour, and I was with Sam Baca, and there were problems on the tour with lefties and righties.
Okay.
And the basic problem was there was so much more wear and tear on the right side that the lefties were at an extreme advantage. And what had happened was back in 1963, they changed the resurfacing rule, and the proprietors didn't have to resurface every year. So now the right side got below par, and the left side was nice.
Okay.
And anytime you give a group an advantage, so they did. So we started doing the lanes in '71 on the tour, and Sam and I worked together for 7 years. And then they wouldn't give us a raise, so we both went our own separate ways. Then they had all kind of problems after that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So then you came back.
I came back in '83. They begged me to come back. I went back for 6 months, and I couldn't stand what I saw because the whole game had totally changed. Urethane balls came out.
Okay.
Guys were hooking the whole lane. And the accurate players of the '70s were all dying out, and the power players were all dominating. And I think that hurt the game.
Stevie, what are some of the things you remember as far as, then versus now, obviously, within lane maintenance?
Obviously, when I first started bowling, the equipment was all rubber and plastic. When I first started, up to the point of 1980. As far as tour, I was hired out of Seattle in my first tournament, which was in Riverside, where I met Kerry and Lon Marshall. Of course, there was a lot of changes during that summer of that year, to where Lonnie went another direction, and that's when I met Lenny in '88 at the Showboat, and he took over the director's part of lane maintenance, and we went through our little evolution from urethane balls right into reactive resin in '92, and that was the other big change that was much bigger than the urethane days in the '80s. And up until this point in time.
What do you think the percentage of, let's go 1985 and under, what do you think the percentage across the board was, tournaments that y'all bowled in wood bowling centers versus synthetic compared to now?
Well, '85, they were starting to transition from wood lanes to synthetics. And all the major companies had a different brand of synthetics. And so it got to be like 50%, and then the next year 60%, and by 1990 it was like 90%. So it became a synthetic game.
In which today we essentially could safely say we're 100%.
Yeah.
Pretty darn close.
On a
Not
PBA
100,
level
but
for the most part.
there's still wood lanes out there.
Right, but on a PBA event
they're
level
all
for the
synthetics,
most
yes.
part, for the most part. How much awareness, I know some of the stories, because we've been together a long time, and hearing John talk about, different things, but how much awareness did you both have about topography, back in those days, and did you have any options to work around it, or did you let the center play?
Well, that's a great question, because that's probably the determining factor, basically, when it comes to fairness. Because we knew very early on that something else had to affect the conditions, because we would do the tournament lanes the same way week after week sometimes. And it was high scoring, and then the next week would be low scoring. So we did the same thing last week. What's going on here? But we didn't have any of the wherewithal that Kegel and John Davis brought aboard.
The tools were minimal,
Minimal.
basic at that time.
Right, and what we did was, I would usually go in advance, and I'd put down a pre-tournament check, and then Kerry and Steve would come in, they'd put that down for a day or two and watch it, and see what it was like, and determine exactly what condition to use. And so we lost Kerry after a while, then the senior tour started up, so I went out and did the senior tour, and Steve did the regular tour.
Right.
So we really didn't have the luxury of going in advance anymore, but we had to go by remembering and knowledge and what worked in the past. But we knew there was something besides oil.
So pretty much after Lenny came in, it was basically up to you or Kerry's eyes and what you were observing in that center to give any feedback on, hey, listen, the lanes we thought should be playing this way, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point, you kind of understood the characteristics of the center.
Characteristics a lot. Plus, a lot of people forget that, when we come in, we're taking over the center for a little over a week with Lenny's pre-tournaments, and for 51 weeks it was all house shots, and the hard wall in the center, which it took more than a couple days to get out of there, so you would see kind of transition or little changes as you went through the qualifying portion of the tournament, and it kind of stabilized like the first, the second day, and we're always questioned on that, because we knew it, but bowlers not looking at the lanes or going out on there. All they did is go by their own ball reaction.
Why is it changing? And I experienced some of that in the minimal roles that I had out on tour, because and that was one of the things I think y'all taught me as well, is that, hey, listen, we're putting out a basically Abraham Lincoln top hat, 51 weeks a year, and we've pretty much got a memory in that surface.
Exactly.
That would
That's
take
the right
some
word.
time to get that off of there.
Memory. Right?
Memory.
Yep.
Right.
Unbelievable. Let's change gears a little bit. Let's go with, we'll start with Lenny on this one. You got a funny lane maintenance or PBA story?
Wow. You know, I wrote a couple of books. Some of them have funny stories. There was something funny probably every week. I'm kind of stuck here for a second, but because I got you here, you and I went to do a tournament one time in the ladies tour out in Vegas. And you were very, very disciplined. Your tools are all clean. You wipe the cord every lane. And I'm an old junkyard dog spray gun man. So you were going in the back room for a minute to do something, and I was your boss basically, but you told me, keep an eye on that machine. Okay, Don, you know, here's a guy 100 pounds, I'm 300, he's telling me what to do. So he's walking in the back and he's looking over his shoulder, and as he got toward the back room, I shook the cord.
I remember that.
And it went back and forth, and he went, what was that? What was that? Don't be doing that. He's yelling at me. And I laughed. That was one of the funniest things I ever seen, because you were the best, man. You were so, I mean, your tools are just beautiful. Your nickname's a wrench. What can I say?
I had good mentors, without a doubt. How about Stevie? You got one you can think of?
Well, nothing really funnier, but it was just what sticks out in my mind, how such a minute change on a machine kind of just blended out the whole field for the rest of the week. It was a tournament that John met us in Boulevard Bowl in Edmond, Oklahoma. And we're using the old four-pumper we call the SM1.
Ford only oil, did not clean.
And Richard Altman had one of the original machines. So we started doing the lanes, and we're both looking at it going, man, it's wide open on one side to the other. And how do we, well, long story short, John went in there and took all of it, and I believe, Len, we adjusted that whole machine like 2 boards to one side.
Yep.
And then we ran, and it just fell into place.
Did nothing else with the pattern. Just
Nothing,
did a mechanical
same pattern.
tweak.
All we did is adjust that thing over, all 4 heads, over.
Exactly.
And the whole conditions just fell in. We had a fair tournament, lefties, righties, tweeners, boomers, squad. We had the
Bitchers,
whole.
moaners.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have that every time, you know. Yeah.
Excuse me.
That's quite all
But
right.
that's what sticks out, how it just fit, and how well that tournament was running after that. It was. I've always thought of that.
All right, I'm going to start with you. How about best tournament experience sticks out in your mind out of all the events you did out there?
Well, arena settings, obviously, that we really got. I got kind of pumped up over that, going from regular bowling center into arenas, whether it be Erie, Pennsylvania. The big one was Detroit at Joe Louis Arena.
Oh.
You know, hauling my stuff across the parking lot and getting into there, and then the first thing, I was getting chewed out by the foreman, because you walk into a where it's all union. Mm-hmm. There's some things you just can't do.
Absolutely.
So just getting it all set up, and then being the last one out of Joe Louis Friday night, because I had to set up and get ready for that, and to stand in the middle of the lanes and look around, and there's no one in the building, and right in the middle of Joe Louis and looking around, and said, wow, is there a lot of history here?
Wow.
Just going into the locker room and seeing the photos of all the great players from the Detroit Red Wings and whoever, it kind of gave me a little chills, you know, even though I'm a Seattleite, but Detroit's been a marquee, hockey team for years.
Heck yes.
Kind of give me the chills. That's kind of sticks out with me.
How about you, Lenny? I know it's tough to pick them, because even for me it'd be tough to pick them as well.
Well, yeah. Number one, right after I met Steve and Kerry, very shortly thereafter, we had a tournament down here in Florida. And I went in and I saw Skip. Remember Skip down here at Cocoa Beach?
Yeah.
He says, I got a guy that wants to use his lane machine for the tournament. Well, I was only spraying the lanes because I couldn't trust any lane machine. They didn't work every day.
No.
And so the next morning, in comes John Davis with this machine. I never met John in my life. And he's showing me that 4-roller one.
Right.
And he says, I'll be here every day. I'll make sure everything's right. I'll keep track. I'll make a report and all that. And he was just so into it that I said, sure, I'd love to try it. And so we did the tournament with his machine, and it proved that it wasn't enough oil for the pros,
Sure.
but it had the basic foundation that we wanted to do. And then John started hanging around and asking us a million questions, because John knew bowling. He didn't know the tour.
Right.
And that's what he wanted us to do. And I'll tell you what, and I got to say, the next thing that came about was in '95, I retired. And he says, come to work for me. And I says, I don't want to live in Florida. I'm a California boy. I don't like the alligators and bugs and humidity. Oh no, he says, you don't have to do the lanes. What do you want me to do? Just teach me everything you know. He says, we're an information bank here. We want to pass along as much knowledge.
Absolutely.
He says, you can work for me for 6 months and we'd be on the phone all day. Because I never use a computer. I'm an old goat, you know. So he finally taught me how to do that. So he says, you got to come down and meet my staff. Well, I was the #1 lane man in the world. I was in charge of the PBA, right? So I walk in, I got the chest sticking out, and they had a big sign, welcome Len Nicholson. I really felt like a big timer, really welcome. It was down at Herbie's
I remember.
Bowling Center in the Sky, and that sign was there, and I walked in, and Mark was down on the approach, and he was teaching guys how to run the lane machine and all that. And he goes, hey, this is Len Nicholson. Everybody's hello, Len. And I walk in the back room, and I met you and John Binger and Dennis Gemmer, and there's like 5 guys. You all knew more than I did. And I thought, wow, this place, I got to be involved here.
Not true.
No, it's true. You guys all had computers, you had programs, you had the whole 9 yards. And here I was, an old dinosaur with a spray gun. You guys are all geniuses, man. I love that. I did.
Unbelievable. You know, and we talked earlier about, obviously, I mean, you've written a lot of material over the years. Some you probably couldn't publish, you know, but you've got another book out.
Yeah.
I'd like you to plug that and kind of show the audience. This is Stone 8.
That's the name of it.
Stories
Yeah.
behind the PBA's 60 most memorable moments.
Yeah, this past year, the PBA was their 60th year. So they started out with getting all the bowling writers from the history of the PBA for 60 years to say, what was your best moment? They had about 300 of them. And they culled it down to 200, then 100. And then they had a big vote. They brought it down to 60 of the best moments. Like the #1 moment was Don Johnson leaving the 10-pin
Up 299.
face down
Yeah.
and all that. So I thought that'd be a great thing to help publicize the PBA, because I've always been a PBA guy.
Sure.
And Tom Clark, he's a great man. He loves to
That
promote.
is.
And this will promote that. And so I thought, let's do something a little bit different. So I wrote a story about each one of the moments. Then I got this guy, he's an artist, his name's Sam Villarreal. And people have seen his work on Facebook and whatnot.
Okay.
And so I wrote the story, and he drew a drawing of what the story was. And that's what this is, 60 stories, 60 illustrations. And it's been out for a week and a half now. It's selling like unbelievable.
Get a chance, get a copy as soon as you can. If you hadn't got a copy of the PBA Hall of Famers, pick that up as well. I've got an autographed copy from you here that I keep on the desk at all times
You're
for the
going to get another
show.
one, Bart. Thank you.
You know, having both of you on here has been absolutely incredible. I was able to obviously do some pretty cool events. You know, for me, one of the big ones that stuck out was also an arena show, and it was also one of the ones that our friend Jason Couch won during one of the TSCs. That one of those times. You got any advice for our younger players? I'm going to start with you, Lenny, and then go to Steve. Any advice for the youth today coming up that want to be competitive and be successful in this wonderful sport that we have?
It is a wonderful sport, and you know what? It's gotten to be a little bit easier in some regards because the equipment's gotten so much better. But it's also more difficult because you got to determine what ball to use.
Sure.
And that's a hard decision to make. So the whole thing still boils down to 3 things. #1 is your physical ability to make shots. #2 is what ball do I use? But more importantly at all is your mental game. The top players are the ones with the best minds that think positively all the time. And so those are the 3 factors. #1, the mental game. #2, equipment. #3, making good shots.
Excellent sound advice. Stevie, I've asked you this question before. You've been on the show, so we'll see if you give the same answer or something different. But advice for up-and-coming youth.
Well, mine's pretty parallel to Lenny's, but I got to go back on all the tech support I do on patterns and machines and everything. I come across people calling up for pattern help, and as well as you know, I talk a little bit longer than normal on the phone to people, but I want to get my point across, and it's 3 words, and they're all the same: practice, practice, practice. Because no one practices anymore with the elevation of the scoring pace. Because people feel it. Okay, I'm averaging 220.
I'm doing,
I
I'm doing it good enough. Exactly.
I'm doing good enough. But nevertheless, it's called muscle memory and repetition. And by practicing, you can do that subconsciously with practice. You don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is worry about thinking about hitting what you're looking
You
at.
can adapt to that environment.
That's
change,
correct.
That pattern change
And
quick.
very people fail to put a little extra into the sport to be the bowler that they want to be, and practice is part of that. And a lot of the bowlers have failed at that part, and I encourage a little more practice. That's what I pretty much try to convey to bowlers, which works.
And we definitely see that here at the training center with the Weber team. These kids you mentioned
Certainly.
this morning, while the girls are already here, 7 a.m.
I like hearing.
I mean, you know, unbelievable. Gentlemen, I cannot thank you both enough for coming out. It is a pleasure to see both of you, and more importantly, we'll get to see each other this weekend on and off as well.
Absolutely.
Love
Thank
you, my
Donnie.
brother. Without
I
a
watch
doubt.
your show every time
you,
it's
brother.
on.
I love you, brother.
You
you
do
too.
a fantastic job, and I'm serious.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't tuned into Phantom Radio every Wednesday, make sure you do it. Wonderful shows, incredible guests, treasure trove of knowledge once again. And for those of you that ever need some additional tech support, Stevie's always here as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. Keep those wrenches turning. Have a wonderful day.